Good morning, everyone. Can everyone hear me? First, I'd like to welcome you all to this morning's call and this presentation of the 5 key considerations when moving from on-premises to cloud ERP. Leading today's call is Lavanya Sallagundla. She's the head of testing at SuneraTech. She's going to kick off the presentation in a moment. Please feel free to ask any questions you may have during the call or during the presentation in the chat area, and we will address those during the Q&A portion of the presentation. And without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Lavanya. And thank you again all for joining, and we hope you find this informative. Lavanya, take it away.
Thanks, Ed. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining. So in today's session, we'll talk about 5 key considerations when you are moving to cloud SaaS applications from your on-prem applications. And we'll dwell into each of these areas and pertaining to what you should be looking out for when you've decided to move into this journey, not just during implementation, but also post-implementation, how things are different from how it used to be when you have been working with on-prem applications for several years before undertaking this cloud journey. So the 5 key areas that we'll talk about today that you should be considering when you think about moving from your on-prem systems to cloud, because it's going to be a huge paradigm shift in terms of how things are when you move to cloud. And if you plan for it, it's going to be much easier when you undertake the migration or how you handle it once you go live with your applications, right? So the first area is change management. This is one of the key areas that you should be considering, and we'll talk more about that. The second one is the user adoption. Once you move from your on-prem systems where you have a lot of capabilities to customize to the huge extent possible on how your business processes are versus how it is with cloud. The third area is the continuous delivery that you start getting from your cloud provider and how to handle those. Fourth is it's not just your cloud applications, but all the integrations that you need to be dealing with, the inbound integrations, outbound integrations, integrations with your existing systems, third-party systems. How do you handle that part of it as well during and post-implementation? And number 5, this is very critical as well, which most of the time gets ignored during the planning phases, which is how do you handle quality assurance and testing, again, during implementation, and then once you move to post-implementation, how do you continue to do the release validations and handle the continuous delivery and innovation that is getting provided to you effectively by your cloud providers. Right, so these are the 5 areas. So let's get started with the change management. Working with a lot of customers who have undertaken this journey, one of the key areas that we see customers having to struggle with is the change management process, right? Because it's definitely a paradigm shift when it comes to on-prem to cloud. The reason being, when it's your on-prem systems, you have complete control. It's your infrastructure. It's your you decide when releases are going to happen, when you want to take patches, when you want to take upgrades, how frequently you want to make changes. All that is determined by you and your teams. And what goes into a particular release also is the whole release planning is done by your team, right? So you have a complete control on situation when you're on-prem. But when it comes to the cloud applications, you're kind of giving all the control to the cloud provider. It's their infrastructure. They decide when releases are coming in. They decide what goes into a release, and you pretty much have to follow that. So if you don't plan for this particular change, it would become very challenging for you once you undertake the journey, as well as after you get into the cloud, right? Because we need to plan for it, knowing that you don't control it, somebody else is controlling it. Again, if you plan for it, it's not a big deal. It actually helps you because you know exactly when things are coming in. It's very planned. It's as long as you can plan for it, you're okay. But it's something you need to think, you need to account for when you start undertaking this journey. The second part of it is, again, the changes that are coming in are much frequent and faster than what you used to when you're on-prem systems. Because one good example I can give you from an Oracle Cloud standpoint, Oracle EBS systems, the number of patches and changes that they have provided from the time of the inception of EBS till last year, the same number of changes were pushed to their Oracle Cloud in 1 year's duration, right? So the frequency and the releases, the amount of speed with which you get the changes is much faster, which means you got to plan for it, right? So what are the mandatory changes? What are the enhancements that are coming in every release? What are the new features that are coming in? Do I want to take it? When do I want to take it? There are a lot of these decisions that you would have to make as part of your change management process. If you plan for it, you're going to be very successful during the implementation. The last but not the least is, not having the ability to have any backward compatibility or no rollback options, because like I said, somebody else is controlling it. So you'll get the releases that are getting pushed, whether they're working or not, they get into production, and then getting them to roll back or doing a patch releases is not that easy, because these are being done across thousands of customers. So if something is not working in your environment, getting the cloud provider to just back off the change is not that easy, which means you need to plan to ensure that you're doing proper validations, not just of the application, but any data flows across your other applications and systems as well, right? So these are the three main areas that you should be thinking about when it comes to change management. The next one is the user adoption. What I mean by that is, from a user adoption standpoint, your users have been using your on-prem system for long periods of time, and they know how to use it. They know how it is set up for your organization, and they've been using it for a while, so they're very comfortable with it. But having them shift to completely a cloud SaaS application that gives you much less capability to customize versus what you were able to do in on-prem systems, requires them to understand what are the configurable components, what are non-configurable components, what are the things that you can personalize, and how the new interfaces, understanding the business flows, and all those things are new for users. So prepping them on the changes coming in would be very helpful. Also understanding from an acceptance testing standpoint, during implementation and post-implementation, what should be the focus, right? Because with cloud applications, about 80% is going to be common across all customers, where about 20-25% that you could do any customization, any configurations or personalizations when you're implementing it for your organization, right? So understanding what are those, and how do you validate it during user acceptance, during implementation, and also once it goes live, then when you're getting these frequent changes, how do you adopt to that? What should be the business users looking for to feel comfortable that every time there is a change that is getting pushed, everything is going to look good from their standpoint, right? The third one, again, we talked about the frequent changes that are coming in. When you're getting these frequent changes, it's not just the fixes and enhancements, but the cloud providers are pushing a lot of new features rapidly as well. And that is one of the reasons you're moving to cloud, so that you can actually take advantage of all the new features and innovations that are getting pushed by the cloud provider that you don't have to deal with yourself. But one of the challenges we have noticed with the adoption of these new features is that customers are struggling with adopting these new features, and they keep putting it off because they're so focused on just looking at the ones that are mandatory changes that are coming in, and new features keep getting put on hold. And it almost at some point in time becomes like your on-prem systems, where you're not taking advantage of the innovations and features coming in from the cloud, and losing the advantage of actually going through the whole cloud migration, right? So planning for it every time, the frequency with which changes are coming, when these new features are coming. So putting aside some time to actually understand these new changes coming in, and how does it help your business? When do you want to adopt those changes? proactively planning for it would be very helpful for you to be able to take advantage of all the features and functionality that is getting pushed in a much faster clip by your cloud provider than what it used to be with on-prem. So that's the user adoption thing that you should be considering. The third one is the continuous delivery that gets pushed to customers. So with the whole continuous delivery process that the cloud provider is providing to you, there are benefits associated with it, but there are also new responsibilities that you would be undertaking. So understanding what are the new responsibilities that you would be undertaking would help you tremendously to plan. So in terms of the benefits, what you would get is, like I said, the cloud providers are providing new features and functionality at a much faster pace. So all the innovation is coming to you, and you don't have to wait for years to get things updated. It's a predictable timeline and schedule. So though it is being controlled by somebody else, they put out a complete schedule. You know exactly when you're going to get a release. What is coming into the release, and so the schedule is set. So at least you know it's coming, so you can plan for it. And from your team standpoint, since you pushed a lot of these things to the cloud provider in terms of fixes, in terms of enhancements and all, your team gets a lot more time to focus on other core business related tasks that they can do, right? So that's another benefit with the continuous delivery and the cloud migration that you do. You do get faster delivery of features. You get fixes and improvements much faster than on-prem. And moving to the cloud is obviously one of the key stepping stones for your whole digital transformation innovation that most of the organizations are currently undertaking, right? But with this comes new responsibilities as well. So let's talk about the new responsibilities. So when it comes to new responsibilities, keeping up with the pace of change is important. Planning for it, making sure you have the right resources available, making sure you are able to understand the changes coming in, adopting those changes and all is important. Planning is very important. Evaluating what's new and planning ahead would be very helpful in terms of adoption. Otherwise, you'll wait till your cloud provider makes certain things mandatory, and then you're going to scramble and try to adopt it. And you're going back to how you used to be with on-prem, which really does not serve the purposes of you moving to cloud. And keeping up with the application running when things are getting updated as well. You have to keep up with your day-to-day stuff when the changes are coming in, as well as any continuous acceptance and validation testing that you would have to do, whether you get changes quarterly, whether you get changes every 6 months, depends on your cloud provider, and handling the validation requirements, planning for it would be important as well. Fourth one is the integrations. Obviously, integrations you need to consider very important, both during implementation as well as ongoing changes that are coming in, because it's not just your applications, the SaaS applications that you have, but the integrations with any other on-prem systems that you have, any other third-party systems, whether they're inbound integrations, outbound integrations, different types of integrations, with the API-based integrations, file-based integrations, and all that, right? So considering the integrations, how the data is flowing, making sure that there is no data corruption happening, there is no inconsistent data across your applications leading to your failures in your analytics and reporting part of it, right? So those becomes very important, because we've noticed that some of our customers struggle with the applications are working fine, but then when it goes into production, something or the other is not working in terms of integrations, right? So making sure that integrations are taken care of as part of the implementation as well as post-implementations as well would be very important. So that's another thing that you should keep in mind. Number 5 is the quality assurance and testing for customers who are planning to do the migration to cloud. Need to consider traditional testing versus continuous testing. What I mean by that is when you're looking at the whole implementation cycle timeline, you have different phases that you're going to go through. Usually testing is being done, some testing is being done by your implementation partner, but then you get into the testing mode, some during SIT, but mostly during UAT. But if that is the time that you're catching, you're actually looking at it and finding issues, it's too late to be able to find issues. So since your implementation also happens iteratively, it's a good process to be able to leverage automation testing from the get-go. As and when your modules are getting configured, start implementing automation so that you can leverage automation during at module level, and then at SIT, and then at UAT as well. And the reason I'm saying you could use automation even at UAT level is because with cloud applications, there's quite a few things that are going to be common, and you can leverage automation, and your users can focus on first understanding how the application looks like, focusing on the key process areas, focusing on the areas that are more problematic that they know they have noticed or they've been working with, focusing on those versus things that can be tested through automation, right? So we've had some customers where almost 80% of the UAT testing was done through automation, and they were focusing more on the 20% and getting the users acquainted with the new systems, the new processes, the new user interface, and validating the results that the automation has provided. So that way, even if there are any changes or something you missed and you plan on adding some additional cycles that you haven't originally planned, with automation in place, you can keep up with your timeline. You'll have more confidence going into UAT because you're leveraging and finding issues ahead of time. The implementation cycle, the schedule could be kept intact more or less, with unplanned things that come into play. Because one of the things that becomes a challenge is your users still have a day job, and they still need to make sure that they have to do that as well as doing this user acceptance testing during implementation, and understanding this whole new systems. There are a lot of things that you cannot anticipate at that point in time. And implementing continuous testing through automation is going to be of tremendous help for you in doing a successful implementation and with high confidence when you're going into production, right? So the kind of options that usually you have available when it comes to testing is obviously you can do everything manually. It could be time consuming, both during implementation and post-implementation. Your coverage might not be comprehensive because let's say that you have to add an additional cycle. You obviously cannot have a complete cycle of testing again done. Also, you have to keep in mind when you're doing implementation, during that implementation cycle, your cloud provider might still provide some updates as part of their ongoing continuous delivery that they do, right? So do you want to adopt those things? If you do, then you have to do more testing. So planning for it and doing a lot of manual testing would become one. If you want to do properly, then you have to spend a lot of time, or you have to pick and choose what you want to test, which means you're kind of hoping and praying that everything looks good when you go into production, right? So manual testing does have its limitations. And after implementation with manual testing, one of the challenges you would face is you'll have to make decisions whether you want to focus on only mandatory changes or can you also look at new features adoption, right? But with manual testing, we have noticed a lot of customers are heads down, focused on things that they need to absolutely accept and keep pushing off the new feature adoption for a later stage. The second option you have is, building your own automation using tools available. So there are tools available in the market like Selenium or, other licensed products that are there where you can either get the tools license, build a framework around it, get the resources who can actually use the tools and continuously maintain your scripts. You can get the automation up and running in 3 to 6 months usually. One challenge we've noticed, especially with cloud applications, with building your own solution, is the ongoing maintenance part of it, right? Like I said, the amount of time you get once your cloud provider pushes the changes into your environment is very little. And the only time you're able to see how those changes are impacting your automation scripts is after it hits your test pod. And by the time you figure it out, it might not be enough time for you to update the test and execute it, right? So when you are evaluating automation tools and frameworks, always look out for, yes, can it automate the applications under test, different types of SaaS applications you have? That's obviously very important. But the key question you should be asking is, can they maintain the tests in the stipulated time that you would get when you'll have to do the actual testing, when the releases come to you? Remember the lack of control that I talked about, right? Because you don't have a lot of time to be able to do these tests. So can these tools and frameworks that you are going to implement, how quickly can they maintain the changes coming in after, because they can only see the changes after it gets hit in your test environment, right? So those are the key questions you should be asking when you're evaluating the tools for your build option. The third option is buy option, subscribing to an automated testing as a service where you don't have to worry about licenses, hardware, software cost, resource cost, and all. Just subscribe to an automated testing service so that you can focus on what is important for your business and let the testing and validations for the releases being taken care of somebody else, right? So those are the three options that you can consider during and post implementation of your cloud solution. Okay, so I'll quickly talk about a customer case study so that you can actually get an idea on how one of the customers who moved from On-Prem to Oracle Cloud SaaS dealt with some of these areas that we talked about today. So this is a US-based insurance brokerage firm with operations in 33 countries. And as part of their cloud strategy, they've decided to migrate their HR systems from Oracle EBS to Oracle HCM Cloud. They did this in two phases. Phase one, they had 3 modules that went live: core, HR, benefits, and compensation. And phase two, they've had payroll, time and labor, absences, and performance. And they've had this implemented across US, UK, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand. So as part of their implementation, this customer was leveraging automation for their EBS systems, and they've seen the benefits of automation in terms of change management as well as the whole release validation benefits that they've realized. So as part of their cloud migration, they've incorporated that as part of their key strategies. So when they went live with phase one, before they got into the SIT UAT phase, they've got the modules automated, so they leverage that with during UAT, as well as once they went live, they handed over the whole post-release continuous testing to the provider to do the testing. And then for phase two, they started focusing more on phase two implementation and getting that rolled out. All right. So by the time they went live with phase two in April of last year, they had everything automated, all modules across all countries, and everything was being validated through automation. Right. So this is kind of the modules and the phases and the test cases that they've had. And so from a change management process as well as the whole testing, everything is done through automation, and they've been using this automated testing for all their post-implementation quarterly patches that they get from past several releases without any issues. So how are they handling the quarterly patch lifecycle? And this is now post-implementation, right? Once they go live, they were continuously getting the patches, and the way they handle the quarterly patch life cycle is the step one is doing an automated change management impact analysis, so that they know exactly what is coming in, what's changing, what needs to be what they need to account for in terms of the fixes, enhancements, new features, and all, and having that report provided to their business users to be able to see what's coming so that they can prepare for it. Next one is maintaining and executing the tests. Whatever the impacted changes are coming in, updating the scripts, and executing the whole regression suite to make sure nothing's getting impacted because of the changes that got pushed. Right? With automation in place, this client does not have to do just impacted test cases. We actually do complete regression so that anything. Sometimes the release notes doesn't capture everything. There might be certain things that are assumed. And if you don't do that proper regression, you might miss things into production. And as we talked about from a change management process, if something gets missed into production, it's not going to be easy for you to roll back or do a patch release to get it updated. In some circumstances, your cloud provider might do it, but most of the time it's going to be very difficult because they're not pushing these changes for individual customers. They're pushing these changes for thousands of customers. Right, so that's having a regression suite would be very helpful. Also, it's not just functional regression testing, but also doing auto health checks in terms of any process slowdowns or making sure there are no security breakdowns is also an important aspect that is being taken care as part of the quarterly patch testing. And then retesting any issues that are being done because this customer has implemented automation and does automated change management. They are able to do all the testing, auto health checks, impact. All this is done within 2 to 5 business days of the test pod getting updated. That leaves plenty of time to work with your provider if you find any issues, or if you need to make any fixes, you can do that and then retest it and get it out into production. Right. So this is the kind of end-to-end process every time there is a patch lifecycle that comes in. And since this is an auto customer, they take updates every quarter, and this is how it was working. In terms of benefits that got realized by the customer, since with automation they were able to 100% coverage, they were able to adopt new features 2 times faster than other customers who are doing things manually. They're also able to reduce cost of quality by 55%. And last but not the least, they're able to get the whole release validation out of the way within 5 business days. That leaves them plenty of time if there are any critical bugs that needs to be fixed and get it revalidated and stuff like that. What are the non-tangible benefits that they got? Having this in place eliminates any business disruption because you're continuously making sure everything is looking good and you don't have to hope and pray that things work when you go into production. You're able to free up your key personnel to focus more on business critical tasks and drive business value versus doing release validations every quarter. And believe me, it comes very fast, right? And having to focus on tasks that doesn't add value to the business, right? And you can also focus more on the new features that are coming in so that you can make decisions on adopting these new features so that you can provide better employee experience or user experience to your employees or customers, depending on the applications that you have implemented. Okay. So I wanted to talk quickly about the automated release validations or SaaS applications of one of the products that is provided as a subscription service. So this is a Cloud Tester platform that we provide as automated testing as a service where you are able to see on the platform, the dashboards, you're able to download results, download documentation and all that, while we are able to implement automation, maintain and execute. It's a scriptless solution because of which we are able to get automation up and running for our customers within 4 to 6 weeks. And we're able to execute the test within 2 to 5 business days, like I've mentioned in the previous use case. And one of the biggest things with this, again, is it's not just getting you up and running with automation, but ongoing changes. Every time you're getting it, we are able to execute them in a much faster pace from a maintenance and execution standpoint than anything you might do it on your own. right? We do have a lot of pre-built test cases already available, so we're able to get you up and running much faster for your implementation, and not what your cloud provider is providing to you, providing to all customers, right? So this is how you have implemented it, and how you would be testing it. So it supports not just functional regression, end-to-end testing, but also all types of integrations as well. And also making sure that there is no performance slowdown or any security breakdown that happens as well. Okay, so I'll do a quick demo of the platform so you can see how it actually works in action. So this is the login screen. It is hosted on the cloud. We also have the capability to provide it on-prem, but most of the cloud customers prefer it on the cloud. So once you log in to the platform, you are able to see the dashboard. And with the dashboard, you can actually see all the different types of applications or modules that you might have, what has been planned to be automated, what has been completed, the reviewed and signed off and all that. And you can even drill down into details from a dashboard standpoint to see, okay, I want to see for core HR, what's happening, or if you want to see how many are completed, how many are in progress. So all that drill down you could do for the development, execution, as well as defects. Same thing with your test case executions. You could actually see all the test cases that have been planned to be executed, how many passed, how many failed, and all. You can also filter by releases, so you can see what has happened for a particular release, what is the status of the execution, and all this is real time. You can log into the platform at any point in time. Though we're providing it as a service, we're providing it as platform as a service, so you can actually log into the platform at any point in time to get all the necessary details that you need from a metric standpoint. So same thing with the defects stats as well. You can either have the defect stats here, or if you want it integrated with your defect management tool, whether it's Jira or others, we should be able to do that, or we can log the defects there as well. We'll take a quick sample test case. This is a HCM test case, Oracle HCM test case for hiring an employee. So if you take a look at it, you're able to actually capture, as part of the test case onboarding, you can capture the screenshots as well, so that when you do the documentation, we can auto-generate the documentation, including the screenshots. Right? So you're able to actually see the steps and the screens, so that it's the same way that you have your manual test cases written, but this is being auto-generated by the system. So even if something changes in the next release, let's say there is a change that comes in for hire an employee process, you should be able to auto-generate the most recent updated documentation. So your documentation never goes stale, and you can even use this for training purposes as well. So a lot of our customers actually use this for training purposes. If you do the implementation of this during your cloud implementation, then the documentation that is getting generated here can be translated and leveraged for training as well. Right. So again, the description and all is configurable. You can add as much details as possible. That would help with understanding of the steps that are being performed. Same thing with execution. You also get the execution results in a much detailed fashion. So if you look at it here, all the transaction details are getting tracked every time a test gets executed. So this way we know if there is any performance degradation as well, because we know from a previous test to this test, if there is a significant degradation in performance, we'll be able to run a report, track it, and share it with the customer as well, so that you can work with your cloud provider to get things resolved. So even the test results are pretty detailed. So you get the steps, the screenshots. You can download the same. If there are any failed steps, we show that up front, so that you can actually take a look at it, and instead of scrolling through the whole results file. So if you see you have the steps performed, whether they passed or failed, and then you have the screenshots associated with it. So I talked about the business users focusing more on understanding the application and the 20-30% that are more critical test cases versus testing all regular scenarios. Because these things, even if it's run through automation, they can still validate the screens to make sure everything looks good instead of them actually performing the test themselves. Right, so that saves a lot of time and effort even for the business users on top of all the new things that they're having to deal with during implementation as well as post-implementation. Right. One other thing I wanted to show here is the test data management as well. So we do automated test data management so that we don't have to worry about test data when executions have to happen. That's another reason it saves time when we are into the execution mode. Whether it's static data or dynamic data, we are able to get the data from different sources to be able to perform automated data management. And this is something that we do when we do the initial onboarding of the automation tests. And then after initial onboarding is done, every time execution is happening, we know exactly where the data is coming from, what data we should be using for your organization, and we should be able to do that independently without having to keep coming back for data. You can also iterate through the test cases with different sets of records. So, for example, if you have different types of hires that you do, we actually have a customer who is a large trucking company, and they have different types of drivers that they hire. It could be part-time, full-time, exempt, non-exempt, and there's like 20, 30 different rules and regulations that they have and different types of hires that they do. So for one automated test, they're able to execute 20 different records to make sure that all different types of hires are working as expected every time there is a release. Right? So all that is done through the platform itself. You can also do end-to-end tests without any manual intervention. So you can actually group test cases. If you want to do hiring an employee, making some changes to the same employee, terminating the employee, and then rehiring the same employee, you could actually do that as an end-to-end test right here. So the way it works is you could just create dependencies of the test cases. So we know that the output of the first test case becomes input to the second test case and so on and so forth. That way, when the test execution is happening, we have these 3 test cases that run in sequence, and then we have these test cases that can run in parallel. And this is something that can be used even from an approval workflows as well. So if you want to test the approval workflows, we can set it up here so that we can log in as different users and do the approvals for anything that we need to do. You can also do the end-to-end through integrations as well here. So let's say that you have to make an API call and then get the necessary information and then use that as the data into your test case. Then you can run that as the first test and then create the dependencies to use that to run the subsequent tests as well. So this kind of helps you with the whole end-to-end test without having to do any manual intervention. And you can do the end-to-end test not just within your system, but also across different systems as well. Because it's an enterprise platform, we are able to automate your on-prem systems, cloud systems, integrations, and all that. So we can tie things together to be able to execute an end-to-end flow. Okay, I'll quickly show a little bit on the integrations as well. So like I said, we can test different types of integrations, whether it's SQL-based integrations or whether it's any API-based integrations. We should be able to create them and then create the tests associated with the integrations and do the same. We can also schedule the tests for in Cloud Tester, or if you want us to integrate it with your continuous integration process, we should be able to expose an API where you can trigger the tests from your continuous integration process as well. You also have other reports and metrics from a release level as well. We can set it up so that you can see for a particular release how many tests have passed, how many tests have failed, how many have been executed, and things like that. right? If you are a payroll customer, especially Oracle payroll customer, we do have a self-service tool that enables you to do data validation for payroll, whether it's your payroll activity report or payroll register report. You should be able to, with a click of a button, validate pre and post patch. So you can just run a report before the patch, upload it. You can run a report after patch, upload it. You can even set tolerances, whether it's standard earnings, I am okay. If it's 0.01% variance and all that. And you can get these either in an email, an Excel, or you can check it right here. So you can just check the variance report here, and you'll get the data at summary level, at component level, as well as at employee level. So you could go into details to see what the variances are. So with the click of a button, you're actually even able to validate the payroll data. Not just doing functional testing through Cloud Tester, but also doing payroll data validation as well, especially for customers who've got a large employee base, and it's very critical that you validate the different types of payrolls that you're running every time there is a patch that gets applied. You should be able to validate this. Okay, so we'll just go back. So why some of our clients use Cloud Tester? Especially for Oracle Cloud customers, it's the only platform that's certified by Oracle. We provide this as platform as a service, and it's price subscription consumption-based pricing. So you're not paying for licenses or people or tool or anything like that. You're just paying for what you're consuming, just like your cloud applications. There are a lot of pre-built test libraries available. You can see metrics, like I showed you, the dashboard is available to you at any point in time. We do automated data management. We're able to onboard you with automation within 4 to 6 weeks, and execute anything under 5 business days. Maintain and execute, not just execution, but maintaining and executing the test. We can also provide data security of PII data to ensure that we don't get any access to your PII data when we are doing any testing. We also provide automated change management and auto health checks. So there are no process slowdowns or security breakdowns that are happening as part of your patches that you're taking. We also auto-generate documentation. So your documentation is never going to be stale. You always are able to keep up with the documentation as you're going through continuous changes and that are coming your way. You can also download results files any point in time by logging into the platform, and the results files are very detailed with screenshots and steps. So it becomes very easy for your users to be able to validate it, even if they don't do the testing themselves. We do support integrations, both inbound and outbound integrations, and last but not the least, audit support. A lot of customers are having to deal with either internal or external audits, and having the ability to just logging into a platform and see what has been done for a particular release, what changed, what has been tested, what passed, what failed, screenshots, all the things that usually an auditor looks for is already available on the platform. So just logging in and sharing that would save tremendous amount of time for the team members that are having to do audit support. Right. So these are some of the things. So I'll open it up for questions. If there are questions, please, this would be the time we can talk about.
Thanks, Lavanya. Are there any questions? I don't have any in the chat at the moment. You can also use the Q&A section of the Zoom conference if you have questions about the presentation or for Lavanya. We have one that's coming in. So the first question is, looks like it's from Sharon. Will we be making this presentation available, Lavanya?
Yes, we'll make the presentation and the recording available.
Okay. And where will that be on? We're going to put that on LinkedIn, or are we going to email that out?
We can email it out as well as it will be on the site, and we'll also put it on LinkedIn.
Okay, great. Okay. Are there any other questions for Lavanya about the presentation, about the cloud tester, about testing in general, about moving from your ERP solution to the cloud?
Seems to be a couple more questions, right?
Yeah, I've responded to that. So Sharon is, just she prefers email for the presentation. So I guess, Lavanya, I guess one question is, so this is a platform as a service. Who executes the actual tests?
We do it. So since we're providing it as a service, though you can log into the platform, look at the results, download the results, download the documentation and all. In terms of onboarding, maintenance, and execution is done as part of the service by us.
Okay. Any other questions from the audience regarding, like I said, regarding cloud tester, the presentation, testing in general, concerns about or considerations that you may have questions on when you're moving from an on-prem solution to a cloud solution? Okay, Lavanya, I don't think we have any additional questions. So I believe we can wrap it up if you're okay with that.
Okay. Thanks everyone for joining.
Thank you all.